want to be respectful of your time. The last thing I remember, I really liked this book. It was just, I think it was at the beginning of the chapter, and it said, "You don't need to think all the time." And it made me laugh out loud, because it really is such a simple thing that everyone knows, but no one knows. Because if your mind is on autopilot, and why meditation and yoga and all these things, not to mention drugs and alcohol, why all these things are so popular is because, like, we become a bit of a slave to our thoughts. Sam Harris, who talks about meditation on his podcast fairly often, is a big proponent of this, that, like, unless we learn to quiet our mind and to realize that we're not our thoughts, it's easy for them to just take us emotionally and drag us all over the place. So just reading that, I think a lot of people would really just help being told, like, you don't need to think about that right now or ever. It really is your choice on one level or another, and so I just would love to hear you talk about that tiny element.
I mean, it's a tagline I sometimes put on things, is think less, be more, because I think we do have this bias in society that, to be thoughtful and reflective and to think about things. Like, this is, again, one of my pet peeves in mental health. So if you have a person who has anxiety, and they ruminate and they worry about things and they come in for help, traditional mental health psychology treatment would be to get them to sit on the couch and to talk about it. And what are you worried about? And why is that a worry? And I just, from my perspective using evolution, that is the wrong approach. Like, what you should be doing is coaching that person around how to become actively, mindfully engaged in their world, to the point where it blocks that stuff out. You can't work through that stuff by talking about it more. I think I have an example in the book about it. If someone was choking, your idea to help them would not be to put more food in their mouth and see if you can shove it down. But that seems to be oftentimes what mental health perspective is, that if someone has trouble with thinking too much, let's get them to think even more and work through it and talk about it. I think that the route to us feeling better overall is to have less stuff to think about, because from the perspective of evolution, we developed within a very small area of the world. So let's say maybe 20 square kilometers is all that we could access in our lifetime. That didn't include trouble in the Middle East or war or viruses or, all sorts of stuff that now our world is the entire world. So we have so much stuff going on in our brains. So I would encourage people to take that social media, or especially a news holiday, because I did that early on, where I just stopped listening to the news on the morning commute, and that made a big difference, because it's consistently the case that you will hear a story on the news that frustrates you, like politician getting away with something, or mismanagement of funds, or different things that you think, like, how can that go on? How come there's not repercussions? And then you dwell on it and you worry about it and you think about it. But you have no control over that. That's not your domain. So I think it's super important for us to understand that thinking less, having less mental activity, is not a sign of weakness. It's not a sign of not, living up to your potential. It actually might be the route to finding your own potential and to being fully engaged in your life in a meaningful kind of way that you just were missing out on before.
Right. I really love that. And you touched on something that I want to continue just